In today's video, an encounter in a Sheffield park would end in murder. One was walking with a friend, and the other had spent recent days growing increasingly paranoid about threats to his grow operation inside his home. This is Curios&Spiritual. We take a look at the case, the police investigation, and trial. In the days leading up to April 17, 2021, Danny Irons, 32 years old, was living at home with his mother and 3 young children in Sheffield, South Yorkshire. He resided in the Manor Estate, a large housing development southeast of the city known for high deprivation levels, dealing activity and violent crime. Despite these conditions, Danny was, by most accounts, a family-orientated individual who was trying to stay out of trouble. Danny had a known criminal record which included past incidents involving theft and minor violence, but by 2021 there was no significant ongoing police matters involving him. He was not working formally at the time, but was known to be doing casual work and socialising with a small group of friends in the Manor and Woodthorpe areas. In the week before the incident, Danny was seen regularly in the neighbourhood and was described by family members as in good spirits. He'd been spending time with his children. He had also reportedly spoken with friends about wanting to find steady employment and distance himself from local criminal activity. Meanwhile, on Danewood Drive, approximately half a mile from Danny's home, Ross Turton, aged 30 years old, was living alone. Turton also had a criminal record and a known history of dealing-related activities. In early 2021, he was running an illegal grow out of his home. Evidence presented later in court indicated that Turton had become increasingly paranoid in the weeks leading up to April 17th, fearing that his operation would be discovered or robbed. Turton had installed security cameras at the house in Preston Road South and had alerts sent to his mobile phone each time any motion was detected. People in the area described Turton as someone who had become withdrawn and distrustful. He had allegedly told others that people were watching his house and trying to set him up. There was no police reports filed by Turton regarding threats, but his behaviour had raised concerns among some acquaintances. Danny Irons, who had previously stolen a crop from another cultivation nearby, triggered an alert from a camera system on that evening on April 16th, as Turton spent time with his cousin at another house in the area. This part of Sheffield, particularly the Manor of Woodthorpe Estate, had long been associated with grows and dealing activity, antisocial behaviour, and incidents of serious violence. The park, commonly used as a cut-through between neighbourhoods, is wooded and poorly lit at night, offering secluded spots out of view from nearby homes and cameras. During the same period, police were monitoring ongoing dealing-related issues in the Manor and Woodthorpe neighbourhoods. While Danny Irons was not specifically under surveillance, both men lived in an area known to South Yorkshire police for dealing activity, weapons possession, and escalating interpersonal disputes. There is no confirmed evidence that Danny Irons and Ross Turton had a personal relationship. However, Turton believed, without clear evidence, that Danny had either stolen from him in the past or was planning to. Turton had reportedly been messaging others earlier in the week about people coming for him. At approximately 9:30 PM, Danny Irons left his home he shared with his mother and children. He had arranged for the children to stay overnight with a family member, allowing him time to socialise. He met up with a friend shortly afterwards and was later seen purchasing alcohol from a local shop. CCTV footage of witness testimony confirmed that the 2 men were not acting suspiciously. From there, the 2 men walked towards Woodthorpe Ravine, heading south from the Manor area. They entered the park sometime around 12:15 AM on April the 17th. At that hour, the park was mostly deserted. Meanwhile, Ross Turton, aged 30, was at his home on Danewood Drive, less than half a mile away. At some point that night, exact time uncertain, he was joined by an associate named Daniel Chadwick. Turton was reportedly agitated and paranoid, continuing a pattern that had emerged in the weeks before. He was worried about being robbed or attacked. According to the court records, Turton had been armed with a knife earlier that night. It is believed he brought it with him when he left the house. There is no known record of direct conflict between Turton and Irons prior to the night, but Turton had reportedly told others that he believed Irons, or someone associated with him, was planning to rob him. Turton and Chadwick entered Woodthorpe Ravine by foot. Their exact route is partially known due to a combination of CCTV coverage from surrounding streets and testimony provided during the trial. What is clear that at approximately 12:38 am, Turton and Chadwick encountered Danny Irons and his friend somewhere in the central area of the park. The sequence of the encounter was later reconstructed, in part from Chadwick's statements and forensic evidence at the scene. There was a brief verbal exchange described in court as a confrontation, though the exact content of the conversation remains disputed. There is no evidence that Irons was carrying a weapon or acting aggressively at that point. During the encounter, Turton produced a knife and stabbed Danny Irons in the chest. Danny collapsed within moments of being stabbed. His friend present during the incident called emergency services at 12:39 am, reported that Danny had been stabbed and was unconscious in the park. The caller did not initially identify Turton by name, but described the attackers as fleeing the scene immediately after the stabbing. Paramedics arrived at Woodthorpe Ravine within minutes, alongside officers from South Yorkshire Police. Danny Irons was found on the ground, unresponsive and bleeding heavily from a single chest wound. Emergency first aid was administered on site, and Irons was transported by ambulance to the Northern General Hospital. Despite medical efforts, Danny Irons was pronounced dead at 1:34 am. The cause of death was later confirmed as a stab wound. The knife left an 18cm wound and entered through Mr. Irons' armpit. It penetrated his lung and heart before reaching the other lung and left him with catastrophic internal bleeding. Ross Turton and Daniel Chadwick had left the scene immediately after the incident. CCTV footage shows two individuals leaving the vicinity of the park, heading towards Turton's home address. At this stage, police had no confirmed suspects, but statements from Danny's friends and neighbourhood reports quickly narrowed the investigation. Turton returned to his home on Danewood Drive, where he remained for several hours. During this time, he took steps to dispose of key evidence. He later discarded the knife used in the stabbing, as well as clothing worn during the incident. The weapon has never been recovered. Daniel Chadwick, meanwhile, left Turton's home not long after they returned. He would later provide crucial witness testimony to police in court, stating that he'd known Turton planned to carry out an attack and that he had not participated in the stabbing. At approximately 4 am, responding officers cordoned off Woodthorpe Ravine and began forensic examination of the scene. A single bloody beer can was collected and several witness canvasses were conducted with nearby residents who reported hearing shouting or a scuffle around the time of the incident. By mid-morning on April 17th, police had officially launched a murder investigation led by South Yorkshire Police Major Crime Unit. Danny Irons' death was treated as suspicious from the outset due to the nature of the injury and the circumstances of the encounter. The area around the park was cordoned off in the early hours, and a forensic examination of the scene began shortly after sunrise. Officers from the Major Crime Unit were deployed and evidence gathering started immediately. A crime scene tent was erected over the area where Danny Irons had collapsed. Forensic officers began collecting blood samples, discarded items, and impressions from the surrounding ground. A beer can found near the body was retrieved for DNA fingerprints and analysis. Several local residents, alerted by police activity, approached officers to report they had heard shouting or loud voices between approximately 12:30 and 12:45 am. Others reported seeing two males fleeing the park towards Danewood Drive, shortly after the time of the incident. Danny's friend, who had been present during the stabbing, had made the emergency call. He gave a statement to police later that morning. He described the attacker as a white male, approximately 30 years old, wearing a hood and possibly gloves. He did not initially identify the suspect by name, but his statement provided investigators with a starting point. Detectives began reviewing CCTV footage from nearby homes, shops, and council-operated street cameras. This included footage from surrounding streets such as Freston Road, Harbour Avenue, and Danewood Drive. Detectives tracked movements of known individuals, including Danny Irons, from earlier in that evening. Surveillance confirmed Danny's route into the park with his friend and showed two of the men, believed to be Ross Turton and Daniel Chadwick, entering the area from the south side around the same time. Detectives also began conducting door-to-door inquiries on Danewood Drive and nearby streets. Within 24 hours, Turton's name was mentioned multiple times by residents, some of whom said they'd seen him acting suspiciously or had heard rumours he was involved. By April the 18th, Turton had become a person of interest. That same day, police visited Turton's home on Danewood Drive to speak with him, but he did not answer the door. Officers noted that the curtains were drawn and no movement could be seen from outside. Attempts to contact him by phone failed. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued to examine evidence. Blood collected from the scene was matched to Danny Irons. DNA and fingerprint analysis on the beer can, though results would take several days. On the morning of April the 19th, police secured a warrant and entered Ross Turton's home. He was found inside and arrested on suspicion of murder. At the time of the arrest, Turton offered no resistance. A search of the property revealed no knife, though several items of interest were collected, including clothing, a mobile phone and grow-related materials. Daniel Chadwick was also arrested shortly after as a potential co-conspirator. Both men were taken into custody and interviewed separately. During his police interviews, Turton exercised his right to remain silent, answering no comment to most questions. He denied involvement in Danny Irons' death. Chadwick, in contrast, cooperated. He admitted to being present at the park during the stabbing and identified Turton as a person who stabbed Irons. Chadwick stated that he had not known Turton was armed and did not participate in the assault. He told police that Turton had been paranoid in the days prior and expressed fears of being robbed. Following Chadwick's statement and continued analysis and surveillance of forensic evidence, Ross Turton was charged with murder on April the 20th, 2021. He was remanded into custody to await a court appearance. Daniel Chadwick was released without charge, though he remained a witness in the case. A senior officer involved in the investigation commented, "This was a violent attack that resulted in the death of a young father. We believe this is an isolated incident, but we're asking anyone who may have been in the area that night or has any information to contact us." Following the murder charge against Ross Turton for the fatal stabbing of Danny Irons on April 17th, 2021, the Crown Prosecution Service reviewed the available evidence and approved the case for trial in the Crown Court. The case was scheduled for hearing at Sheffield Crown Court, the jurisdiction responsible for handling serious criminal offences in South Yorkshire. Turton was charged with one count of murder and the case assigned to a judge and jury. Daniel Chadwick, initially arrested alongside Turton, was not charged with any crime, but was listed as a prosecution witness. During pre-trial hearings, the court ruled that Turton would stand trial for murder only, and no additional charges. Turton entered a plea of not guilty to murder. His legal team stated that the stabbing had occurred in the context of a confrontation, that Turton would argue he had acted either in self-defence or without premeditated intent to kill. The prosecution, however, asserted that Turton had carried a knife deliberately and had used it with lethal force, making it a charge of murder. The trial opened in October 2021 at Sheffield Crown Court before Mr Justice Goose. The jury consisted of 12 members sworn in following standard selection procedures. The case was prosecuted by Peter Molson, King's Counsel, and Turton was represented by a defence barrister appointed through legal aid. The prosecution laid out a clear timeline of events leading to the killing, supported by CCTV footage tracking the movements of both Irons and Turton, witness testimony from Daniel Chadwick and others, forensic evidence including blood patterns and wound analysis, mobile phone data used to confirm Turton's movements and contacts. Crown Prosecutor Peter Molson, King's Counsel, presented the case that Ross Turton had armed himself with a knife before entering Woodthorpe Ravine, that he had no lawful reason to be carrying the weapon, and that he deliberately used it during an unprovoked confrontation with Danny Irons. The prosecution stated this was not a spontaneous act. Mr Turton went into the park that night with a knife in his possession and used it with fatal effect. A central moment in the trial came when Daniel Chadwick took to the stand. He testified under oath that he accompanied Turton into the park, but had no knowledge that Turton was armed. Chadwick told the court that Turton had become increasingly paranoid in the days leading up to the incident, expressing fears that he was being watched or would be robbed. Chadwick described the encounter in the park as tense but not violent until Turton suddenly stabbed Irons. There was no shouting, then Ross just stepped forward and stabbed him once. I didn't see Danny with a weapon or anything like that. Under cross-examination by the defence, Chadwick maintained that he did not expect violence that night and had not seen Turton with a knife before the attack. The court heard from the Home Office pathologist, who confirmed that Danny Irons had died from a single stab wound which penetrated the heart. The pathologist stated that the injury was immediately life-threatening and would have caused death within minutes. No defensive injuries were found on Irons, suggesting he did not fight back or have time to react. The angle and depth of the wound indicated a forceful, deliberate thrust rather than an accidental or glancing injury. Turton, through his barrister, argued he acted in self-defence, believing that Danny Irons was going to attack him. The defence claimed that Turton had previously been threatened by others in the area and been living in fear due to the grow operation at his home. Turton chose not to take the witness stand, and the defence did not call any witnesses to support the self-defence claim. Instead, the barrister argued there was reasonable doubt as to whether Turton had intended to kill Irons or whether the stabbing was an overreaction during a confrontation. The defence argued that this was a fast-moving situation in a dark park at night. My client believed he was at risk. That does not make him a murderer. Following the closing arguments, Mr. Justice Goose gave the jury legal directions, including the definitions of murder, intent, and reasonable self-defence. He instructed jurors to consider whether Turton's actions were proportionate and whether they believed he intended to cause serious harm. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours before returning a unanimous verdict. On November 2nd, 2021, the jury found Ross Turton guilty of murder. The following day, Turton returned to court for sentencing. Mr. Justice Goose sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before he is eligible for parole. In his remarks, the judge stated, "You armed yourself with a knife and used it to stab an unarmed man in his heart. This was a senseless and avoidable act of fatal violence." Turton showed no visible reaction as the sentence was handed down. His legal team released a statement about Ross Turton. Money was hard to come by, and he accepted the opportunity to become involved in a grow which featured so much in the trial. He is anything but a typical defendant in the Crown Court. His family are shocked by this allegation and this conviction. Following the guilty verdict on November 2nd, 2021, and the sentencing of Ross Turton to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years, the family of Danny Irons issued a final public statement through South Yorkshire Police. They expressed both relief and grief. "We are thankful for the justice being served, but nothing can bring Danny back. He was a loving father, a son and a brother. Our hearts are broken and always will be." Danny's death had left behind young children, and much of the public sympathy centred around the loss of a father. His family requested privacy, but thanked the local community for ongoing support throughout the legal process. It has taken me a long time to think of a conclusion to this brutal case. The events that unfolded in the park were not the result of chance alone. They were shaped by choices, fears, and an environment where knives and paranoia quietly coexist. Danny Irons didn't expect to die that night, and Ross Turton may not have set out to kill him. But the presence of a weapon turned a fleeting confrontation into a permanent loss. What this case leaves behind is not just a prison sentence or a grieving family. It's a question for all of us. How many of these tragedies are waiting quietly at the edge of ordinary life? Just one decision away from becoming irreversible.